programs for Advent and Lent. But today we'll be discussing faith and immigration justice. And in a minute, we will begin with an opening prayer. But first, I'd like us to just take a minute to call to mind, to reflect on the reason why you chose to show up at this meeting today. Maybe it's because of a story about immigration that you heard on the news recently. Maybe it's because there's someone you love who is an immigrant, or maybe it's because you are an immigrant. And so before we begin, let's just take a moment to honor and silence the people and the stories that bring us here together today. Our opening prayer was created by Mary Knoll, and I would like you to actually join us in reading this together. I'll read the all part that's in bold on the screen, and I invite you to join me in reading that, even though you're on mute. And Heidi will read the reader part. So let's just take a minute and take a deep breath and ground ourselves in this space, and we'll begin. Creator God, your loving care is a home for all.
No one is a stranger to you. With your generous blessings, watch over migrants and all who leave their homes to escape oppression, poverty, persecution, trauma, and violence. Help us to also be sources of blessings through our acceptance and valuing who they are as persons eager for wholeness of life.
Creator, you taught us to welcome all.
Help us to remember that the land we call ours is a gift to be cared for and a gift to be shared with all who come. May we be open to all those searching for a safe and peaceful life.
Help us to pour out your love and compassion to all of our brothers and sisters.
Creator, help us to respect and revere the unknown between and among us. May we grow into new discoveries and accept new ways of learning about our common needs and desires. May respect and reverence break down our fear, anxiety, suspicion, racism, hate, and close-heartedness towards others. Creator, we build barriers in our hearts to make judgments that keep us from seeing others for who they are, the potential they have, and talents they have been given you. You have taught us to give witness to your love for all people. May we be accepting of those who want to be our neighbors. May we rejoice in their talents and accept new life perspectives from them.
Help us to pour out your love and compassion to all of our brothers and sisters.
Creator God, you who are present in all of humankind, guide us to be mindful of your presence and help us to act in ways pleasing to you towards all those who search for a better life. May we reach out to migrants in need of help and acceptance and stand by them as brothers and sisters in Christ. We ask this through Jesus the Christ, who was a migrant. Amen.
Amen. All right. Well, welcome again, everybody. I'm so glad you're with us. I'm just going to share a little bit about the program. Really, Faith and Immigration Justice, the main goal of this program is to guide you in facilitating a holy and healthy dialogue around immigration. And I say holy and healthy for a reason. Just a quick personal story. In 2016, before I came on staff here at Just Faith Ministries, I was serving in a small purple church of both conservative and more progressive folks. And we were surrounded by immigrants, and we really wanted to have a conversation about immigration and how we might be called to be in ministry alongside our immigrant neighbors. But we just didn't have the tools to be able to do this without further dividing the congregation. And so one of the main hopes that I really have for this program is that it will be a tool that you can use to facilitate this conversation in a way that builds trust and understanding in the communities that you serve, even in churches that might be divided on this topic. And something important I want to say too is I know that this can be an intimidating conversation to have, especially in the times that we are living in. But this program really provides all the resources that you need. As a facilitator, you are really there as a participant. The program will guide you in facilitating this conversation through facilitation scripts. It provides step-by-step instructions about, what to say and when to say it. You do not need to have any background on this topic. You're not here as a teacher. You're here as a participant as well. We provide you everything that you need to guide this conversation. Some goals from this program. I think understanding the goals will really help you to kind of understand what this program is and where it's headed and how it might be able to be a resource for you. The first goal is to discern how our faith calls us to respond to the immigration debate that's happening in our nation and explore the reasons why people choose to come to the United States. Our faith really provides so many tools and really a source of a foundation of unity. If we're, coming from the Christian tradition, it provides us like a foundation of unity that we can all stand on in order to have this conversation, and also provides some tools and wisdom for how we can go about this. We can go about advocating for policies and both local and national that are in line with our faith. And so that's our first goal, is to really understand what our faith tradition has to say about immigration. Secondly, you'll learn about basic immigration policies. You'll learn how to answer the question, why don't undocumented immigrants just get in line for citizenship? And other myths as well. There's a lot of myths about immigration, and this program will really help you to explore some of those myths, why they exist in the first place, and to help. It will guide your congregation in changing the narrative around immigration. Thirdly, it will equip participants and groups to advocate for policies that are just, compassionate, and effective in order to welcome their immigrant neighbors within their local communities. It will provide some tools for advocacy that you can use, that are easy to use, and it will also lead up to a session 8, a final session that is a discernment session of next steps that you can take both personally and as a congregation. You will not stop with just learning about the issue. The program really leads you directly into action, and this should be a smooth transition for you as you journey from the program and into welcoming your immigrant neighbors in your community and in our nation. And then last, this is a goal with all of our programs, to transform a collection of 8 to 14 individuals into a real community of love and support. The members of your community will continue to encourage each other as you seek spiritual transformation and take action for justice after the program is finished. Our programs really are different from a book study or a Bible study in that they really bring folks together. We found that a lot of times groups will stay together for years and even decades after their program experience is over. And so while a lot of times we avoid bringing up the topic of immigration because we fear that it might be divisive and cause tension, I think you can actually expect this program to build trust in community rather than tear it apart. Before we get into what each session really contains, I just want to say a word about the focus of this program. The program really focuses in on immigrants who are crossing our southern border, though it absolutely does touch upon a global migration and immigrants coming to the U.S. from non-Latin American countries as well. And the reason that we did this is because we found that this is such a large and complex issue. We found that a deeper understanding of this particular slice of this issue will help your group to better understand migration in general and motivate you to learn about and learn from immigrants from other countries and cultures as well. And so next, I'll just walk you through the program itself and share a little bit about what's in each session, so you'll know what to expect. Session 1, as I mentioned, this program really centers on facilitating a holy and healthy dialogue around immigration. And so session 1 is an introduction to each other and a theology of migration. It provides group guidelines for building a community of trust. And these are guidelines that you can turn to throughout the program as disagreement arises, because disagreement will arise and different perspectives are a good and healthy thing to have in your group. And so these guidelines will guide your group throughout the program in deep listening, even when there's disagreement, and mutual respect, even when there's differences in perspectives. And so, and then in addition to providing these group guidelines and some basic training around how to have difficult conversations, the first session also introduces some general themes within our biblical canon about migration, and then it zooms in on a specific biblical passage. And so you'll really start from a foundation of faith and theology. Session 2 explores the history of immigration to the United States. And actually, in a few minutes, we'll do a really small excerpt on the simulation that is included in session 2. This is an interactive activity that was actually written by our friends at the Office of Social Justice from the Christian Reform tradition. And it's a fantastic simulation. It guides participants in exploring the hopes and fears around immigration policy throughout U.S. history. And so that we can really learn from the mistakes that we have made in the past and create policies that are rooted in love and justice rather than fear and greed. The third session is really my favorite. It's an immigration simulation that explores the questions like who is eligible for citizenship, or how do people apply for citizenship, and how long does the process take, and who can become a citizen. Participants receive a card that provides a description of a real life situation of an immigrant who is trying to come to the United States, and it walks you through the simulation. You walk through the process of applying for a visa and are able to determine whether you would be eligible for citizenship or not. So it's a really great simulation, and it generates a lot of great discussion. Session 4 is called Why Do People Migrate? And there's actually 2 parts to this. You will view together a documentary on some of the big picture factors that spur migration, especially the international economic policies and military interventions that have spurred migration across Latin America. And then session 5, you'll hear from a guest speaker. And then after hearing from the guest speaker, you will integrate some stories and data from the past 4 sessions in order to have a conversation around the factors that push people out of their home countries and then pull them to the United States. And so this will be a continued discussion on why people migrate. And then I want to come back and talk a little bit about the guest speaker. There's really 2 opportunities to connect with some of the work that might be already going on in your community around immigration. And so the guest speaker is really one of those opportunities. The program materials will guide you in connecting with someone, perhaps from your local community. And if you cannot find anyone, maybe from the our national connections as well, are some options to come and speak to your group for the first half of the session. This can be a great way to hear from people who are already involved in immigration justice work, maybe have a story about immigration themselves. And then it will also kind of help your group to begin discerning how they might be called to get involved in immigration justice work and welcoming immigrants in their congregations. The 6th session is on current issues in migration. And so this really gives you a chance to tap into the interests and questions that your group has around immigration. Over the next several years, our immigration policy is inevitably going to be changing. And this session leaves space for that, for you to pick topics that are interesting and important to you and your group and important to us as a nation, and to dive into them and explore them deeply. And there's guidance around how to do this in a helpful way and how to have conversations as a group. Between 6 and 7 is an immersion experience in the community. And so this is an opportunity for your group to connect with an organization that is either integrated in an immigrant community, such as maybe a church that is that consists primarily of immigrants, or an organization that is engaged in immigration justice efforts. Of course, you will want to do this with the appropriate posture and respect as you enter into these spaces, and the program guides you in doing this, and also guides you in connecting with the organizations that you might want to visit through your immersion experience. And if you're doing this virtually, there are some options for how you can still engage in a virtual immersion as well. Session 7 is about advocating for change. And so this session will equip your group to engage in advocacy around immigration policy so that you can really affect change on a national level, or in your local communities as well. These are really important tools to have, especially in the times that we're living in. And it will also give you some guidance on how you can create and meet goals that are realistic for you and your group, realistic and attainable for you and your group. And then lastly, session 8, as I mentioned before, this is an opportunity for you to engage in a discernment activity in order to commit to action steps on 2 levels. One action step you will commit to individually, and another action step that you will commit to together as a group, so that you can create change together. Between each session, there are weekly assignments, and including some spiritual practices that you can engage in throughout the week. And there are also reading assignments and videos. A lot of the reading assignments come from 2 books that are included in the program. The first book is called The Line Becomes a River. It's a really compelling memoir that's about a 3rd-generation Mexican American immigrant who is also a Border Patrol agent. And so he describes his reality on the border and the people that he meets there. And it's a really great way. We have a lot of, we see clips of the border on the news all the time and hear sound bites, but he really does a fantastic job of providing a more 3-dimensional view of what is happening on the border. And then additionally, the other book is called Welcoming the Stranger, and it's a more factual book in a way, but the facts are presented in a way that is easy to read and really compelling. It's a policy analysis that it debunks myths and misconceptions around immigration. It shows limitations of our current immigration system. And it also makes suggestions about how we as Christians can think about this topic in light of our faith and advocate for policies that reflect the values of our faith. And so with that, I will turn it over to my colleague Heidi, who will tell you a little bit more about what to expect in this program.
Thanks, Kristen. And as Kristen mentioned, I work at Just Faith Ministries as the Director of Communications and Marketing. I'm actually here filling in for Leela Oakley, who a lot of you have worked with, and those of you who are new to us, you'll be working with when she returns from maternity leave. And so she's off, and we're celebrating with her as she's celebrating with her new family. And so it's a privilege to be here with our Director of Programs, Reverend Kristen Dollar. And so for those of you who are brand new to us and have not experienced the programs yourselves, I'll be walking a little bit through what the structure is like and what to expect in the programs. For those of you who have done some of our programs before, the wonderful thing about our Just Faith programs is that they have a familiar structure from subject to subject. And so they're all about 8 to 10 sessions long. This one has 8 sessions plus an immersion experience. They run about 2 hours, which is a wonderful amount of time to get into dialogue. And so some folks who have done our Advent program, we have a Lent series that's coming up. those are 1 hour mini programs. And one of the things that we hear from some folks is we really want time to dig in. And so 2 hours allows time for both simulations, activity, and then some wonderful dialogue. Like Kristen mentioned, there's immersion experiences and that we can help to guide, and we have suggestions for that really take the learning onto the ground and in the real spaces, meeting people who are living this reality and hearing voices that perhaps we wouldn't necessarily be exposed to. The programs are all conducted in a small group format. Those of you who have done small group learning or small faith communities know the value of that community building and how that really leads to some true transformation. And so you can do these, some other programs, if you want to run simultaneous groups, but we do recommend that for virtual, that the groups stay between 8 and 12 people. And so that does include the 2 facilitator participants. And for in-person, 8 to 14. So if you have a larger community that maybe would like to do it, you could have concurrent groups or maybe groups if they're running in the same room, but making sure that you have space and time for small group discussion to happen in those smaller sizes is what we really recommend. All of our programs are also adaptable for virtual and in-person format. And so there's the manuals are already written out with instructions on how to do each of those things. So when screen sharing occurs, how things might be done differently, whether you're in person or virtual. And we've had some people who have had the experience of they do both. We always recommend that if possible, if you're going to be virtual, to spend some in-person time together, either in your first session or in your at your immersion experiences. And so you'll have access to both those formats, virtual and in person. And then because there's so much richness and so much learning, there's weekly assignments that have resources and readings and videos and things to access between the sessions and that people can read and preview and then bring into their dialogue so that the conversation that happens during the sessions is even deeper and richer. And all of those things are either linked and included in the participant packets. So we have facilitator manuals and packets that have all the links for everything that participants will need already put together in a clean packet that can be distributed easily. And so for those of you who have experienced our programs, this will be a familiar flow to you. For those who are new, each of the sessions has a similar structure, so it's also helpful for the participants to know kind of what to expect week to week. And it always starts with welcome, opening prayer. And so gathering all of the learning and all of the faith, our concerns of faith right at the top and centering ourselves to undertake what's going to lead into some really meaningful activity, some wonderful dialogue. Again, Kristen mentioned that we have some guidelines for building communities of trust for holy dialogue. And so especially in a topic that can be as anxiety inducing or maybe even contentious in some places, having that guidance and that support, both in the materials and then also with the staff to provide some troubleshooting, some tips and guidelines for how to facilitate that dialogue. And then also closing every session and lifting everything that we've undertaken in that time together with closing prayer. And that time of prayer also helps to bring the community together. Having been in a number of Just Faith groups myself, praying for the needs of one another in the group, you really begin to connect with one another and understand and have great empathy for the other people in your group. So it's a wonderful, wonderful connecting experience. And so the logistics for if you've never set this up before and you're not sure how to get started, we walk you through every step of the way. The first thing that you would do is come to the website at justfaith.org, and there's a button right on the front page that says start a small group, and you'll fill in the information that you think you might have. It doesn't have to be perfect right off the bat. We can tweak it depending on if you're adjusting your start date, if you're maybe not entirely sure about your facilitators, but you can get the group started, and so our staff can start to connect with you based on what your needs are, who you think might be participating or facilitating, and then we can give you some guidance along the way. And so we have the ability to set up payment either individually so that folks can sign themselves up, and so you're not having to manage payments and collecting and then turning in, or if you're in a community where you'd like to host and have all your participants maybe either participate at a subsidized rate, or you'd like to take care of the registration for them, we can also set that up for you and then invoice you based on how many people actually end up participating. So both of those formats are available to you, and our staff is ready and happy to help set up whatever format you have. The registration cost is on a sliding fee scale. We'd like to make our programs as available as to many people as possible, and in all that we do in social justice, we want to be as equitable as possible. So folks who can pay a little bit more and would like to contribute have that option, as well as people who can choose a lower fee or request scholarship. Those who are facilitators, we thank them for the extra time that they put into preparation. And so facilitators always get free registration. So there's always 2 free registrations with every group that you start with in Just Faith. And as you're getting started, you'll be thinking about, you want to think about what format you want to do, whether it's virtual or in person or some kind of blended approach. Again, we can give some guidance. If you have experience in virtual programs, by all means, if you like guidance on how to do that, we do also have Zoom trainings and facilitator trainings that both support the facilitating needs of what it's like to facilitate a program, as well as the tech needs of what if you're going to do something that's virtual. If you'd like to do something that's blended, your opening session, your immersion experience, your closing are always the great options to do in person. And so we can talk you through all of those things as well. In addition to the facilitation dates that we have on our website for Zoom training for facilitators, we also have a Calendly where there's a link that you can sign up for Kristen's calendar, and they're just little 15-minute segments where you can pop on the calendar, ask a few questions, or set up a longer assistance for you or for other folks who are running the program, facilitating as well. And so there's a variety of ways that we can have staff support you. And you want to consider who your facilitators might be. If you're here in the room today, it might be you. And so if it's you, you might want to consider who you might want to facilitate with. It's always encouraged to have at least one, a co-facilitator. So at least 2 people, because it helps, one, for managing the flow and the preparation from sessions, but also to help move the dialogue along and maybe sometimes troubleshoot some of those places where the dialogue can get a little bit sticky. And so consider who your facilitators might be. There's a question, and we'll come back to that, about the sample materials. If you'd like for people to consider being a facilitator, we do have sample sessions. We have an overview and sample pages of what the materials look like, so they can preview it and consider it in advance. And if you'd like, you can forward the recording of today's session. Everyone who is registered will receive the recording and forward this, as well as forward them any links for facilitator Zoom training, or to get onto Kristen's calendar for 15-minute chats. And then the other couple of things that you want to think about is when you might want to start, how long it might take for you to fill up a group of 8 to 14, or how much time you'll need to, if you're sending it to a church community, how long it takes to get information into a bulletin, onto a website, to make announcements. And so you might need a couple, 2, 3, 4 weeks lead time. And so consider how much time, how responsive your communication structures are. And we do have a promotion kit with every program that has materials, sample bulletin announcements, and social media posts, images that you can use when you're dropping those into your communication. And then finally, recruitment. So the promotion kit can be helpful for that. And I saw some invitations here in the chat. You do have the option to make your group also public or private, both to your community, where you can have just folks from your community signing up, but it's available on the website. Or if you're interested in making it open on a more public basis, you can also just post it. And we had a lovely invitation, I think, from someone in Arizona for folks to join their group. And you might meet some great people from across the country in very different situations. And so if you're open to having a public group, that's an option that you can also select during the setup process, and you can let us know. And then you might have some folks join. I had a wonderful young woman from St. Louis. We had a group that was started in Los Angeles for young adults. And so it was wonderful that we had some folks from across the country joining us. And so a few things to think about. And I'm going to hand it back to Kristen. I'm going to start collecting some of these questions, both about the content and about some of the format. And Kristen's going to walk us through a simulation of an activity in one of the sessions.
Great, thanks, Heidi. Um, so it's sometimes it's really difficult to describe exactly what is in our program. So we've been trying to take a really small piece of our programs and provide them during during our program information meetings. And so we thought today that we would provide a little glimpse of the timeline activity in session 2 that really helps participants to see trends in immigration policy throughout our history so that we can really learn from our past. And so in this exercise, we're going to explore two different moments in our history. We'll explore hopes and fears. And so I'll ask you here in a minute, I'll read the little blurb about the moment in history, and then I'll ask you to type into the chat two things. The first one is, what were some of the hopes that resulted in new immigration policies throughout this moment in U.S. history? And then the second thing I'll ask about is, what were some of the fears that resulted in new immigration policies throughout U.S. history? And so we'll start with a moment from World War I. And this one says, during World War I, Germans and other recent immigrants from Eastern Europe became the targets of anti-immigration suspicion. This fear spilled over into others: socialists, anarchists, African Americans, labor unions, and other immigrants. Dutch Reformed communities even experienced discrimination for being mistaken for Germans. And so I'm going to ask you to type into the chat. We'll just focus on hopes right now. What were some of the hopes of the American people that characterized this period in U.S. history? What hopes might the American public have had for their lives and who they wanted to be as a country? And so I'll just invite you to type into the chat some of the hopes that the American people might have had at this time.
While you're thinking, I'll just add also, Kristen, that if they could be hopes that maybe you don't necessarily agree with, but they were hopes nonetheless.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Heidi. Yes, wanted peace. That's a great one. Yeah, better understanding. They wanted to be safe to pursue their lives free from serving a military that they did not agree with. Safety, yeah. Hope for safety. Yeah, those are great ones. And then we'll turn to, and we can continue to think about that. Yeah, more opportunity. I'll give you a few more minutes to think about that. Yeah, hopes for prosperity and peace, for a country free from violence. Yeah, it's interesting because this hope for peace sometimes creates more violence, in a way. And when we think about opportunities for whom? And safety for whom? Hopes of common values. Economic opportunity and education. Right. How about let's turn to fears. What were some of the fears that might have resulted in immigration policies? Or what are some of the fears of the American people that might have informed political opinions on immigration during this time? What are some of the fears that the American people might have had? Yeah, fear of the other, fear of threats to democracy, which really, we see here from the violence that was created, really creates a threat to democracy, right? Fears of differences, fear of crime and problems, fear of war. Yeah, fear, they wanted to prevent immigration from Eastern Europe and Catholic nations, yes. Yeah, fear of war and ideas of freedom. I love that someone quoted John Prine. Thanks, Dawn. Fear of change. Yes. Okay. Well, thank you all. And so now let's turn to a second moment in U.S. history, and we'll do really the same exercise for this moment too. Um, and so this one says, after a 30-year influx of, uh, let's see if I can zoom in on that. After
You
a
want me to read
30
it?
year
You good?
Oh, I got it. I got it. After a
Okay.
30-year influx of Chinese immigration for work in gold mines and on the Transcontinental Railroad, Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, which prohibited all Chinese immigration and denied citizenship for those already in the U.S. Promised to be temporary, it wasn't repealed until 1943. This was the first law passed by Congress to regulate immigration. The Chinese made up 0.002% of the US population at the time. And I'm going to read that one more time since you can't see the whole thing on the screen. So this is in 1882. After a 30-year influx of Chinese immigration for work in gold mines and on the Transcontinental Railroad, Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, which prohibited all Chinese immigration and denied citizenship for those already in the U.S. Promised to be temporary, it wasn't repealed until 1943. This was the first law passed by Congress to regulate immigration. The Chinese made up 0.002% of the U.S. population at the time. And so, thinking about this particular moment in history, what were some of the hopes that the American people might have had during this time that characterized this point in U.S. history? What were some of the hopes of the American people? And again, I'll invite you to put some of those hopes in the chat. Desire for jobs, absolutely. Hope for more gold that they didn't need to dig for themselves. Growth and expansion of the nation. Hope that things wouldn't change, the cultural makeup would remain the same. A white nation, hopes for progress, the right to vote, prosperity, cheap labor, hopes for a growing industrial strength and power, hopes for a better life. Too much change, too fast, urbanization also changes very quickly, individualism, hope, yeah. Um, how about let's turn to fears. What were some of the fears that the American people would have had during this time that characterized this period in U.S. history? What were some of the fears of the American people during this time? And I invite you to again put the fears um and the fears that you would like to name in the chat. Fear of the other, fear of the loss of jobs, fear of the challenge to culture and religious differences, fear that the nation wouldn't be white anymore, fear of the unknown, fear of a different language and culture, fear of whiteness and Christianity being diluted, fear of diversity, fear of difference. Yeah, especially in relation to communism. Yeah. Fear of anyone different fear of different food and languages. And so if we were actually here in the session, we would explore more points and parts of history together. And then we would take some time to really discern how the hopes and fears during these different moments in history and these patterns throughout our history inform our immigration policies today, so we can really determine what's behind them and so we can advocate for policies that align with our values as Christians. And so I'm grateful for you all for participating in this activity with us, and I hope it was both enlightening for you in terms of learning a little bit about our history, and also enlightening and having just a little taste of what is in the program. And so now we will close in prayer, and then after that we will have time for question and answers. But let's just pause for a minute to take a deep breath and to recenter ourselves in the space, and then Heidi will lead us in our closing prayer.
And we pray. God of our wandering ancestors, long have we known that your heart is with the refugee, that you were born into a time in a family of refugees, fleeing violence in their homeland, who then gathered up their hungry child and fled into an alien country. Their cry, your cry, resounds through ages. Will you let me in? Give us hearts that break open when our brothers and sisters turn to us with that same cry. Then surely all these things will follow. Ears will no longer turn deaf to their voices. Eyes will see a moment for grace instead of threat. Tongues will not be silenced, but will instead advocate. And hands will reach out, working for peace in their homeland, working for justice in the lands where they seek safe haven. Lord, protect all refugees in their travels. May they find a friend in me, and so make me worthy of the refuge I have found in you. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Kristen. And as we're collecting more questions for the Q&A, so we've marked any some in the chat we'll come back to. So if you want to have a moment and you want to drop some more in, we're going to let you know about some upcoming events and opportunities. And then after the Q&A, we'll also stay on. We'll stop the recording for anyone who wants to just stay on for additional conversation or wants to ask a question out loud, but not be on the recordings. We'll have an opportunity for that as well. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a brand new Lent series that's available for pre-order. There's an early bird pricing available until the end of the month. And so for those of you who are introducing Just Faith to either a community for the first time or maybe wanting to invite new folks to explore, this is a great mini program. These are 1 hour weekly sessions without the requirement of assignments. There are some optional activities in between sessions, but the in between is not a requirement. So folks who are either starting to come to Just Faith for the first time, or you want them to consider it, the Lent program is great. And those of you who did Advent, it'll be a similar format as that. And so we will have an info session on that next week. And so we will, oops, the URL is blocked, but we'll make sure to send that out in the follow-up email with the recording. So we'll have that next Thursday. It's also on our event page on our website. And then if you are brand new, so we did have a few people who said they're brand new. If you'd like to have an introduction, a presentation of kind of the overview, this will be with Jack Dresriel, the founder of Just Faith Ministries and our executive director. And he'll go through a wonderful presentation of how to get started, what Just Faith has meant to communities across the country and over the last almost 25 years. And so really consider that. And if you've never been to one of our Acting for Justice webinars, they're wonderful. They're every month. Our next one will be on February 6th. We're putting together the details for people to sign up. And it will be by author Daniel Hunter, and his topic will be an action plan for the next 4 years. And so very timely. We'll talk about tools having to do with immigration, but also on a number of topics. And so I will send these all out to you, and then we will get into the questions. And one of the questions I saw just right at the end was, will these prayers be available in the, they'll be in the recording. And so we feel free to, pull them. We pull them from other places as well. And so you'll see them in the recording as well. And copies of the chat, we don't normally send that out. So if you'd like us to get to connect you with anyone, please let us know. And we can do that. But we usually don't send the entire chat out just because, folks know that they're being recorded, but not necessarily, that their words are also being recorded. And so one of the questions, Kristen, that came on early was, is this program only available in English? And I thought you might want to also mention the bilingual program that's coming out and the unique approach to that, and how folks maybe might want to bring this program to communities where there's more than one language, and the difference it can make in those kind of communities.
Great. Yes, unfortunately, this particular program is currently only available in English. Eventually, we will love to make all of our programs available in Spanish as well. But I will say that we are working really hard on a Spanish-English bilingual program that you can facilitate in all English-speaking groups, all Spanish-speaking groups, or groups that have a mix of both English speakers and Spanish speakers. This program will provide really an introduction to the way that our faith intersects with the social justice issues of our time, and will include themes such as creation care, how we can stand in solidarity with workers and farm workers. And it will also really highlight the particular contributions that Latino folks and folks from in Latin America who are theologians and agents of change and leaders have contributed to our church universal and to our communities, and traditions as well. And so we're really excited about this. We're hoping to launch this in the later spring. So keep your eyes peeled for this program.
Yeah, so thanks for that question, Teresa. If you want to ask any other follow-ups, we'll hang on also if you want to talk about your community in particular. We also had a question about the simulation. Would it be changed if immigration policies change as they may this year? And we are looking, there's a number of executive orders that have already begun. But correct me if I'm wrong, Kristen, the simulation is on the route of applying for citizenship that is not that's not involved necessarily with like TPS, some of these other programs where people are seeking asylum, and that have been instituted and have been adjusted over the years.
That's exactly right. Yes, this is really the path to citizenship, and we'll give you a very basic understanding of how the path to citizenship operates. So not for necessarily for TPS and DACA, within the simulation, but there are opportunities to explore some of those very timely current issues later in the program.
But it's a great foundation for anyone who maybe doesn't know anyone or hasn't experienced what that going through that very lengthy involved process is like, and so is also worthwhile to understand. In addition to the policies that Judy mentioned are changing right as we speak, and so we had another question about someone requesting the materials. I did check while we were in the session, and I noticed that the links aren't quite working the way that we were expecting. So when we send out the recording, we'll make sure to also send out the sample session and the promotion kit and the overview with the recording so that you'll get it all together and you don't have to go back to the website to download. Make sure though that if you haven't been receiving emails from us, like if somebody's been forwarding emails to you, make sure you sign up for emails on your own. Otherwise, if you got the registration link through our website, but if you've unsubscribed at any point, you might not get those other follow-up emails. So just make sure that you're subscribed. And if you want to hang on at the end, I can double check to make sure that you're subscribed as well. Let's see, we have another question about do our groups need to be all of one denomination, all Catholic, or does the denomination matter? Kristen, if you'd like to speak to that one.
Absolutely. You can do this program with an all Catholic group. You could do it with an ecumenical group of folks from really any denomination. It does draw on the Christian tradition that is common to us of all Christian denominations. And so, yeah, you can feel free to include folks in your community, no matter what denomination they're coming from.
And thanks so much, Nicole, for dropping the chat. Your experience, she mentioned that she's had they've had great experiences with multi-denominational groups as well. And so thank you for sharing that. And they are written to be ecumenical, so to draw from all Christian traditions as well. Let's see, we've got some more at the end. We had some wonderful feedback during the exercise, and scrolling through all those, making sure I didn't miss any questions during that time. But you all had some wonderful, wonderful feedback. Will the program discuss how immigration has been used as a political football for years, literally kicking the can down the road and really not seeking solutions?
Yes, I think that you will see that in the extended timeline exercise. You will see that. There'll also be some time during the program to really, it can be really frustrating to talk about this issue and, that point that you bring up, Barbara. And so there'll be time to, really process that with your group, because it can be really, it can feel paralyzing at times. But there are great ways that we can move forward together as a community and create real change in our communities. So, yes.
Thanks for the question. Another great question. Will climate change be studied as an important reason for immigration?
Yes, that is part of the program. I will say that we also have a separate program solely on climate change or on creation care and climate change. We have a whole series that includes this topic as well. So if you're particularly interested in climate, that might be another resource for you to check out. But yes, that is addressed in the program, not extensively, but it is addressed.
And one of the things I love about the programs that Kristen that develops and is that they're very integrated across many issues. They're multifaceted, and so you'll see climate change, immigration come up in the programs on poverty and the ones on eco justice, and so you'll see it come up in many places that it's relevant as well. There was a question about the schedule and the costs. And so the costs for, if people are paying individually, it's a sliding fee scale from 35 to 75. And then with people being able to request scholarship as well, or for an organization to also help subsidize that. And so we can set that up for folks if they're signing themselves up, or if you're paying an invoice for an entire group as well. The schedule is entirely up to you. Most groups that do undertake it like to kind of keep the flow, and so they'll do consecutive weeks. There are some groups that will do it every other week, sometimes because they want to have enough time to really dig into the materials between sessions. I've also heard of a St. Vincent de Paul group that actually uses this, not this particular program, but have used other programs as part of a monthly reflection, and so they really stretch it out. And so it's entirely up to you how you'd like to do it. I would say that it is a commitment, because one, the sessions build on each other. The readings in between do feed the discussion, and so sometimes too much time in between can be a little bit difficult when you're coming back in discussion. You've been away from a while, but if you feel confident in organizing that and communicating with your groups and reminding them about what you're going to be leading into for the next time you meet, entirely up to you, and we can set those all up for you on the website. And we had another question about if anyone's done something interreligious, so Jewish groups and Christians. So if anyone wants to chime in, if they've had not necessarily that combination, but if you've had interreligious experience. I don't know, Kristen, if you have any feedback from groups that have done interreligious groups with this program.
Not that I know of. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a group. This program really does draw on the Christian tradition. That's not to say that everybody is not welcome. Like, you are welcome to have draw in folks from other faiths, but it would be really important that they know that this program is, the foundation of it is from the Christian tradition. But I would be really interested to know if there are interfaith groups that have done this, so or have a similar program that they know of. And eventually we'd love to be able to create more interfaith programs in the future. So keep your eyes peeled for that maybe someday soon.
Yeah, great. And I just see one last question, and then we'll stop the recording, and then folks want to hang on and chat or ask other questions, we'll hang on too. And the last question was, are the 2 books available for purchase, whether we choose to host the program or not? And of course they are. And of course, they're also available in the Just Faith Ministries bookstore. And so any purchases made there, we are a 501c3 nonprofit that tries to make the programs available to as many people as possible. So any purchases through the bookstore also help that effort. And so not a requirement, but always helps the mission. So thank you so much. And some great other ideas going back and forth in the chat. And so we are going to now stop the recording. Kristen, is a good time, and then allow folks to either ask questions or just chat for a bit. And so thank you all so much for joining us, and we look forward to continue being in touch with you, but we'll hang on for a little bit longer.